The Vietnam War was one of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century, involving numerous countries from different political blocs and ideologies. It was not merely an internal struggle within Vietnam, but also a major part of the broader Cold War tensions between opposing global powers, where political influence and military alliances shaped the course of the conflict. Among the countries that took part was South Korea. Its involvement came during a period when the nation was still in the process of recovering from the Korean War, 1950-1953, which had left the country heavily damaged. At the same time, South Korea was focusing on rebuilding its economy, stabilizing its government, and strengthening its national identity. In the early 1960s, South Korea was still facing the major impacts of the Korean War. Much of its infrastructure was destroyed, the economy was limited, and political stabilization was still in progress. In the global context of the Cold War, South Korea stood as an ally of the United States. This relationship also influenced South Korea's decision to participate in the Vietnam conflict as part of international military cooperation. In 1965, South Korea began sending troops to Vietnam gradually. This decision was not only military in nature but also related to international diplomacy and opportunities for aid and military modernization from its main ally. The deployment of troops was carried out by sea in several waves. The soldiers sent were generally military personnel who had basic training and prior military experience. There is limited documentation showing ceremonial departures, as this deployment was considered part of national duty. Upon arriving in Vietnam, South Korean troops faced conditions very different from their home country. Vietnam had a tropical climate, dense jungles, heavy rain, muddy terrain, and difficult access areas. In addition, the type of warfare they faced was not conventional war, but guerrilla warfare that could occur suddenly and spread across many regions. The number of South Korean troops involved in the Vietnam War is estimated to have reached hundreds of thousands over the course of the conflict. In Vietnam, South Korean troops became part of joint military operations with the United States and South Vietnam. Some well-known units involved included the Tiger Division, White Horse Division, and Blue Dragon Brigade. These units were deployed in various strategic operational areas. Their tasks included area patrols, village security, and participation in military operations against guerrilla forces. In many situations, operations were conducted in remote areas with difficult terrain, including jungles and mountain. Experience from the Korean War influenced how they adapted to guerrilla warfare conditions in Vietnam. The war in Vietnam did not always take the form of large battles. Most conflicts occurred in the form of ambushes, patrols, and continuous small-scale operations. This condition required soldiers to remain constantly alert. Threats could appear at any time, both day and night. Difficult terrain and limited information made military operations complex. In such situations, discipline and coordination became key factors in mission execution. Daily life in the battlefield was also affected by environmental conditions such as heat, seasonal rain, and the risk of tropical diseases. Like many armed conflicts, South Korea's involvement in Vietnam is also not free from historical debate. Some reports and studies mention incidents involving civilians, which later became part of historical discussions. These events are interpreted differently by various parties and perspectives, whether military, political, or civilian. Beyond military operations, the daily lives of soldiers were also filled with various kinds of difficulties and demanding situations. Aside from the dangers that came directly from combat and enemy attacks, they also had to endure extreme weather, limited supplies due to geographical conditions, unfamiliar surroundings, and constant uncertainty during long periods of warfare. These conditions often affected both their physical endurance and emotional stability over time. Many soldiers were required to adjust to environments that were completely different from the places where they had grown up. Different climates, languages, cultures, and living conditions created additional challenges that made everyday activities more exhausting than expected. In many cases, they spent months or even years away from home, separated from family members and the normal routines they once knew. Communication with family became one of the few ways to maintain a sense of connection with life back home. Letters from parents, loved ones, or friends were often highly anticipated because they provided comfort, memories, and updates about everyday life outside the battlefield. However, despite offering temporary emotional support, these messages could not always reduce the stress, loneliness, and psychological burden that many soldiers continued to experience throughout the war. During the same period, South Korea experienced significant economic growth. Industrialization began to develop, foreign investment increased, and international relations expanded. Involvement in the Vietnam War also indirectly affected South Korea's relationship with the United States, particularly in the form of economic aid and military cooperation. Thus, this period became one in which domestic economic development and international military involvement occurred simultaneously. In the early 1970s, the United States began reducing its involvement in the Vietnam War as part of a strategic and political shift known as Vietnamization, which aimed to gradually transfer responsibility for the war to South Vietnamese forces. As part of this policy change, U.S. allies, including South Korea, also began adjusting their involvement in the battlefield. South Korean troops were then gradually withdrawn from Vietnam, following the reduction of military operations they had previously conducted with Allied forces. This withdrawal process did not happen all at once but occurred in several stages as combat intensity decreased and political conditions in the region changed. Eventually, all South Korean troops officially returned to their country, marking the end of their involvement in the Vietnam War. South Korea's involvement in the Vietnam War became an important part of its military history, especially in the context of the Cold War and international relations at that time. The Vietnam experience not only shaped South Korea's military capability but also had broader impacts on political, economic, and social aspects. Relations with its main ally, especially the United States, became stronger, while domestically South Korea began to experience major changes in national development direction. In addition to its national-level impact, this war experience also left a deep influence on the soldiers who directly participated in the field. Many of them returned home with difficult memories, including trauma and changed perspectives on war itself. Like many conflicts in history, the Vietnam War does not present a single simple story. Every individual involved had different experiences depending on their role, location, and the situations they faced on the battlefield. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.